and you might just have a little prompt on your screen. So just for the purpose of the recording, I've just been reminded to record, but we're just starting to have a look at what we're going to cover in the session today. So moving down the list, we're going to have a look at the events feature and see how that can be used, and that includes a forecasting element as well. We're also going to touch on the reporting side of things and also cover some top tips of the module, which is kind of what we as account managers have been kind of learning over time and things that we just want to kind of share with you guys as the partners. We'll also cover some questions at the end, as I mentioned as well. So the first bit that we come to is the Rota bit. So the actual kind of building of the Rota. So there's a little picture there to show you what it looks like, but we will have a bit of a live look in a moment. And this screen enables you to build the Rotas, or enables your clients to rather. So they can add shifts directly onto the Rota page. It's really quick and easy to do. There's little things that you can do to make adding multiple shifts easier. We'll come on to that as well. I'll show you an example of that. And we've also got the option to filter to show any unavailability from Breathe HR. So any leave or sickness that's been recorded on the HR side of things does come through into Rota. So you're able to not schedule people who have got annual leave book, for example. There's different views available within the Rota module. So day, week, whether you're looking by department or by employees individually. And you can also select different locations as well. So if your client has multiple sites to their business, which would be over different locations, then you can have people within certain locations, which is set in HR, and they can be viewed by looking at various locations on the Rota screen. So once you've kind of created your Rota for a week, for example, you could save that template and you're able to then reuse that in the future. So it means that you don't have to always be, or the client doesn't always have to be creating the same Rota over and over again. The idea is that you save it and then you can apply that to a future week. For those clients who are perhaps a bit bigger and might have multiple weekly templates going on, then you can do that. You can create multiple templates and name it something specific so you know which template to apply to future Rota weeks. We're going to have a look at the actual building of the Rota section now. So this is the Rota screen that some of you may be familiar with, others maybe not. So I will try and kind of make it as clear as possible, but obviously bearing in mind that we've got partners who might be at different stage of their kind of Rota learning. Hopefully there will be something for everyone. As you can tell, I'm unexpectedly working at home today, which is typical, and the dogs are barking, so I do apologise about that. So when you first land on the Rota page, you'll access the module via the app switcher within the client's HR account. And you'll see this view here. So this is giving you a week view, and you can use these arrows to skip forward to various weeks. You can then look at the employee view as well. The other option is changing it to a day view. So for example, if you've got a client who has a very kind of long shift process, just before I go into this, would you just excuse me a moment? I'm just going to pop myself on mute while I go and do something. I'll just leave you looking at this screen for just a second. I'm so sorry, she's gone upstairs now. Hopefully won't hear her again. So the day view is great for clients who have got kind of a long shift period to cover. So it's a way of really making sure that all those particular hours are covered. Whereas a week view, you can see various shifts, but it's not perhaps quite as easy to make sure all of a particular time frame is covered. You've also got the area view. So the area in Rota is what we would call a department in Breathe. There are plans to kind of change the wording to make it a little bit more kind of consistent. But this is particularly good if you know you've got several different departments and you need to fill various roles within that department. Say, for example, you know you need 3 baristas in the coffee shop on a particular day. You can look at this view and make sure that you've actually got 3 lots of people scheduled to work. How the client decides to kind of use the different views would really depend on, I guess, how big their business is, how many departments that they may have, etc. But it's a case of kind of working out what's going to be best for them for building their rota and just viewing it that way. You've also got the option to select unavailability here. So this is where we can see what's been scheduled for leave, for example, in HR. So I'm just going to skip forward on to a couple of weeks. Just going to go on to a blank week here. And here we'll be able to see that there's some people that have got leave booked. It would show us all day or part day. So when I'm building the rota, I would know that I shouldn't really be scheduling a shift for that person because they have leave already booked. I'm just going to untick that view just for the purpose of the session, so we're not seeing too much on my little screen. How we create a shift, that can be done a couple of different ways. So first of all, you can just choose your person. You can pop in a time. Oops, 10 till 2 p.m. and choose the role that they have. If people have multiple roles set up, then you'll be able to choose the one which is most appropriate for what you need in that particular rota. And the other way of adding shifts is by double clicking on a cell. And with this, you're able to again select their role, and you'll be able to add a pattern to this as well. So if we just pop in 10 a.m. again till 2, nice easy hours these people have. The breaks can either be set as default breaks, which is what we're seeing here, or they can be manually added when you create the shift. And again, that can be configured within the settings. And then you can set their shifts to repeat. So if you've got people not working consecutive days, then this is a quick way of adding shifts for them. And when we save that, we'll see all of those shifts go onto the rota. Or else if we find that somebody's actually going to work 3 days in a row, for example, you can just extend out the shift as long as it's obviously those particular times. Just moving my face over a little bit now, you might notice that this button's gone blue. So this is where we actually share the rota. It's where we tell those people that they've been assigned those shifts, and they would get an email notification to say that, and they can log in and view their shifts as well. So I'm just going to click share the rota. If you've been working on multiple weeks, then it will give you the option to only select certain weeks, for example. And you can select what you want and then share the changes. Now, there is going to be coming soon the option to share rotas by department, by area, because we've had some feedback to say that it's not always just one person that's doing the rota for the whole client, particularly for those larger clients where you might have different line managers of different departments doing the rota for those people. So there's soon going to be the option to share rotas by department, which is really exciting. Once you've built a rota for that particular week, then if you click on these 3 dots here, just move myself out of the way again, you can now save this weekly rota. So if, for example, the client has a kind of like a 2-week rolling rota, they could save it as week 1 or week 2. It's telling me I've already got one of those named in my demo account, so I'll just replace that. And then what we can do is choose a blank week. maybe go for 2 weeks if this is going to be week 1 of a 2-week rolling rota. And then we can select this button here to select week 1. And then that's given me week 1's template, which I can then apply to that particular blank week that I've just selected. Again, sharing the rota will publish those changes and solidify those shifts for those people who would then get notified by email. The other option, if you don't want to kind of save templates, is just to literally copy and paste a week. So if that's going to be a better option, then that can be done by literally clicking copy week of a week that you've just created, finding a blank week, and then paste it on to that blank week. It's telling me that pasting is still in progress, so just bear with me a second here. The other thing I'll just mention while we're on this particular page is that there is now the option for COVID-19 tracing. So what this allows, I'm just going to go back to my week that I had up a few moments ago. Just bear with me. If, for example, somebody has tested positive for COVID, and you want to kind of easily see who might have been working alongside those people, who would be a potential close contact, if you select this button here, you can then say that this person, for example, who was working that shift had a positive test. And then what that will do, the system will then decide who is a close contact of that person, who was working a similar shift or similar times, and then those people can be contacted really easily. I'm not really doing the system justice here because it's my Wi-Fi that's being a little slow, so I'm really sorry. It's not so quick to show examples, but here it will prompt who those close contacts are. You can print it in report form. You can use the filters to change what you want to kind of check, and then it gives you a good way of getting in contact with those people really easily. So that's a little bit about the rota building element. This is how you would change locations. So if you've got 2 locations, for example, you can then switch between them. Changing to the other one will then populate all of the people and the department within that particular location, and then you can kind of work on building the rota that way too. Just been flipped out here as I've gone to change location. Just bear with me. Back to the rota screen here. And just one last thing I want to mention before we go back to the presentation is that those of you who might have been kind of using Rota with your clients, or have been kind of testing it out within your demo account, which is the best way to have a proper look at the module, we'll come on to that towards the end, is that you might notice that within your client's account or within your demo account, there might be some things which say default, for example, default location, or we've got a default role here, for example. Just wanted to let you know that that's something that we're working on correcting, because we know it can be a little bit misleading. So where you see anything default, it means that the person, for example, hasn't been assigned a particular department or a particular role or location, so the system will automatically set things back to default, but we are working on that to be a better experience, so please just bear with us on that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation now. So we've taken a look at the actual rota building. So what we're going to talk about now is time clock. So clocking on and clocking off. That is the time clock element of the Rota module. This is really designed to be a digitization of any manual processes that might be used. So clients might be using a traditional kind of punch clock on the wall. They might be just collecting the information on a spreadsheet. They might have paper timesheets that their people have to complete and fill in at the end of their shift, or they might just be relying on what the person is saying. It's designed to replace those kind of processes. There's 3 different ways that people can clock on. And that's going to very much depend on what's going to be best for the client. So working out what they're doing now with their current processes, what they want to improve, and then thinking about how the system could accommodate that. So the first way of clocking on would be via the employee dashboard within the Rota module. So this is to be used with a shift that's been scheduled for a person. So I've had a shift scheduled from 10 till 2 today. I can log into my Breathe account, go onto the Rota module, see my shift there and clock on via that shift. That's ideal for employees who I guess are more perhaps office-based, using a generally with their role. They might find that the easiest way to clock on. The good thing about this way is that you can also track location too. So for example, if you've got people working from home, then once they've completed their shift, you'll be able to double check their location. It gives it in map form. I'll show you that in a minute. And that gives you a way of kind of cross-referencing that they are where they say they are. The second way of clocking on is via the mobile app. So you probably all are aware that Breathe HR itself doesn't have an app, but we do have an app for the Rota element. So you can download it from the App Store, Breathe People Portal. Your clients' employees can download that. And it means that if they have a role where they are perhaps out and about, perhaps on the road, not coming to an office or not coming to a central point at the workplace, they can use the mobile app to clock in and clock out. Location can be tracked as well. So this is available to configure within the settings, which I'll touch on a bit later. But again, it means that you've got a clock on location for those people who are out and about on the road. Up until very recently, employees could only clock on if they had a shift assigned to them. So, for example, if I was doing a bit of extra work, I know I had to go out on a visit. If I tried to clock on via the app, it wouldn't be possible if I didn't have an actual shift created for me for that. But you can now do that via the app. So this is particularly good for those clients who may not necessarily be using the actual Rota, the shift building element of the module, because the different areas can be used independently, and we'll talk more about that as well. The third way of clocking on is via a central location. So this kind of, I guess, scenario would be for a client who perhaps has a warehouse or a factory, or if it's hospitality, they've just got their kind of one restaurant. They don't have people going out and about for their work on the road. What could happen here is that a tablet could be used. So a tablet could be up in the staff area of the workplace, and whoever can go onto their Breathe account, go onto Rota and launch the time clock. I'll show you how they do that in a moment. But what that means is that they use their PIN to put in their clock on for them personally. And people would then come to use that same tablet, select their name, put their PIN number in, and then clock on for their shift. It avoids the use for having to have their mobile with them, perhaps on the restaurant or the shop floor. And it means that they don't have to be logging into a desktop to clock on for their shift. So the time clock will actually continually run for a 2-week period before it kind of times out, and then somebody else will need to log in and launch the time clock again. So we're going to have a little look at some of those examples now. So let's touch on the last example I gave first of all. So if an employee is coming to a central point, they would log into Breathe, come to Rota, Once they're in Rota, they then click the app switcher again and then launch the time clock. What that does is that it launches it on the screen. They would then have to put in the location that they are, pop their name in and their personalized PIN number in, and that clocks them on for their particular shift. They then use that tablet to come and add their break or their lunch if they're having those within that shift, and then use that same tablet to clock off. The other way I mentioned was mobile. I can't really show you that example now, but it is available, and you can even do some testing of that within your demo account. Again, I'll come on to that later. But the example I want to show you now is clocking on via a shift. So if I just have a look at my rota for this particular week, this particular day, it's Wednesday, it's nearly 11:30, and Mika has a shift for 11:30. So I'm now going to log into the system as Mika and clock on for my shift. I'm just seeing a question here. Where do the employee pins come from? That's kind of quite an appropriate time to mention, actually. They can be set by the employee. So it means that when the employee has access to their Breathe account, they would go on and set their PIN. I will just show you that as we're going into an employee record now. So it can be something personal to them. So when an employee logs in, there's much less option on the left-hand side here, but we can go to preferences and then PIN, and then this is where they can set a new PIN. Quite a recent update on the system, which I was going to come on to later, but I'll mention it now, is that now is the ability to set PIN numbers for people. So for example, if you want to kind of change those PIN numbers up once a month or something like that, then you may wish to do that. And that can be done by yourself rather than having to rely on the employee to be able to do that. We sometimes are asked the question, what's to stop what would stop an employee giving out a PIN to somebody else? And the truth is that there isn't a way of kind of stopping that. Breathe Rota system isn't as sophisticated as having any kind of biometrics in the system. So fingerprint, eye recognition, nothing like that at this point in time. But it is just giving that added level of security. So for example, a traditional timesheet that might be filled in manually, that perhaps could always be room for people to change up the time that they've added for their shift start time. Perhaps they've set it for 5 minutes earlier, but this gives, because it's a digitalized version of that, it gives the added kind of security that it captures their real time clock on. Yes, of course, PIN numbers could be shared and somebody could clock on behalf of somebody else, but I guess that would be down to kind of the culture in the business and having the right policies in place, which obviously you guys as the partners could help with, similar to kind of somebody giving out the password for their computer system, I guess, really. Hopefully there would be no kind of time that would happen, but there's kind of something that you can come back to with that if it does. So as an employee, I'm seeing my shift here. This is the one that I'm going to clock on for. I'm going to click clock on. And then this is telling the system that I'm clocking on at 11:26 for my 11:30 shift. It tells me what break I'm can have if I have a break as well. The other thing that I'll just kind of mention on this screen here is what else we can see as the employee. So I'm just going to wait for that to actually clock on there, just to make sure it captures that. I can check my shifts over the next 7 days. So for example, if I want to see what upcoming shifts I've got, then that would be available. I can also view that information via the app as well. If I've done any shift trades, so for example, one of the things that can be done within Rota is employees can trade their shifts or offer to swap their shifts. That option can be allowed or not allowed within the settings. but it means that employees, if they find that they can't work a shift on a particular day, they can offer it out for somebody else to be able to pick up, or they can also offer it out and say, I'll work a shift for you. There is an approval process with that. So should the client wish for that to be approved before any swaps or offers happen, then there is an approval process where the line manager would have to give the final okay for that. But it's good to know that there is the option there. Again, it puts a bit of ownership back on the employee. It gives them a bit more of a emphasis on them having to find somebody to replace their shift if they're not able to work. So I've clocked on for my shift. I've got the option to select my break or lunch if that's been set within the shifts. And then I'm going to clock off that shift. Just going to let the timesheet run for a few more moments before I clock off. I'll just touch on this tab here, availability. So whilst leave and sickness pull through from HR, there might always be the time where somebody's booking a short notice doctor's appointment for a couple of days' time. Perhaps they don't need to take it as leave, so it's not going to be recorded in HR. But if they can't work a particular shift, then they can select this option here to add their unavailability. That then prompts a message to the line manager to say that some unavailability has gone in from an employee, and it means that the line manager can then go and check the shifts and see what they need to do about that rota then. So I'm now going to clock off as an employee, and that's clocked me off that particular shift. It's obviously a bit of a different clock off time to what the shift is, but just for this sort of demo purpose. So I'm now logging back into Breathe as an HR user. Having multiple logins set up is a really good idea, even though it can be a little bit in and out of different accounts, and I'll come on to that towards the end. So back in as an HR user, and if I want to view any timesheets that have been created, so timesheets are created via the clock on and clock off process, just to reiterate, whether that's been via the mobile app, via the time clock on the app switcher, or clocking on via an employee dashboard. There is also the option for employees to add their own timesheets manually as well. I'll talk more about this a bit later, but you can give employees permission to do that too. So using the filter on this screen here, I can filter by timesheets. Here is where we can see the actual shift, and then underneath it gives the timesheet associated to that particular shift. This one here doesn't have a shift because I've been able to clock on via my app without a shift assigned. And here is the particular one that I'm looking at. So this is the shift that I clocked onto a moment ago. The line manager can come here and view that. I can zoom in to check that I've got the right clock on location. To be at a particular place, so I couldn't come to the office. That could be checked, for example. It also gives the actual time, the actual time of the particular shift, and tells me there's a bit of variance there because I've obviously clocked off a lot earlier than when my shift was due to finish. So if I'm happy with all of the information within that, I can approve it. If I'm not happy with the timings, for example, or I want to query that, then I can do so with the employee. Any timesheets that aren't kind of agreed with would need to be removed. So binning them off here, and then they can be manually added for the person again, perhaps with a note to say, forgot to clock in, recreating timesheet to show actual time worked. And then I can approve that here. The other way I can view a timesheet is from the timesheet screen here. So if the client has an example, has a kind of routine where each of the timesheets are ticked off in the morning for the following day, then they could come to this screen, choose a particular day, and then just run down and approve any timesheets that need approving. Any that aren't agreed with, or if you want to add notes, then that can be done here as well. and timesheets can manually be added for people if that example happens that I said, and perhaps a clock-in time isn't agreed with for whatever reason. There is work as well going on to change this. So rather than having it just as a day view, having it more of a weekly view, I think there might be the option, because if you're approving a lot of timesheets at once, then just by searching each day might be a little time consuming. But if you're viewing timesheets from this view, there's something really handy that you can do. So you can click this little circle here, enable approval mode, or you can just select all timesheets without violations. A violation would be if they've clocked in too early for their shift, or clocked out earlier. So it's a variance to the actual start or finish time of the scheduled shift. But perhaps I just want to only select a few, perhaps not select this one because the time looks a little bit odd on that. I need to investigate that. And then I can click here. That will change that to approved. It will still show the exclamation mark as a violation. All of my demo examples are funny times, but it means that I'm happy with that violation. I'm going to approve that. So that kind of talks about the time clock and timesheets from that. So just to sort of touch on there, I've kind of showed you that they're created from the clock on and clock off process. We can manually add them. You can have auto approval settings. So if the business is vast for the client, they don't want to be manually approving all these timesheets, they don't have the time for that, or the trust is there, timesheets can be auto approved, and there's some options on whether you approve them with or without violations. I've showed the bulk approval option and the location option by looking at the timesheet, viewing the map. And just to kind of emphasize that it's a real kind of capture of accurate working time. So traditionally, manual timesheets might kind of vary slightly in what the employee might be adding on them. This really does give kind of like a true capture of time, like a traditional punch clock. But again, it's having all that data in one place, and we'll talk about some more benefits of using the module in a moment. So I just want to touch on the reporting side of things now. You've got all of this data in the system, you've got people using it, or your clients do, and it's working well, but getting information out of the module, how best can that be done, and what's kind of the key information that we think your clients will want to get out of the system. So there's a few key reports. The Rota shifts report can be really good for an overview of employees' hours. So, for example, it's kind of collating all information about shifts that you have for particular users. Perhaps your client has an employee who has to work 32 hours a week. You can use that report to ensure that they've been allocated all of those hours. Obviously, when you're building the rota, or when your client's building the rota, you can work that out from the shifts that you're adding. But if there's multiple people you're adding shifts for, that could obviously take time if you've got to check that for all of them. So the rota shifts is a really good one for that. Timesheets. So this is kind of the key report for passing information on for paying purpose. So currently the module doesn't link with a payroll software. However, some of you may be aware that we do have our own payroll module coming out soon. Don't have a date yet, I'm afraid, but there will be somewhat of an integration between the module of RTA and payroll. That's all I can say at the moment. We don't know any more specifics than that. But running a timesheets report, capturing the information about how many hours people have worked, which can then be passed on to your pay people, your client's pay people. That might be you as the partner in some cases. So it might be the client passing that information to you, or you going into the system to get it. Working out the hours, or viewing the hours via the report, and then cross-referencing that with whatever information is in HR. To be able to pay those people accurately for time worked. The other report, which is great, is the sales report. So if your client is particularly interested in forecasting, looking at the actual cost of the rota, then this is a really good one to use for that. So I'm just going to go on to the reports now, and we can have a little look at a couple of them. So on the reporting tab, you can press the plus button. Rota shifts I mentioned. For example, we could do a filter of this week. You can drill down as well if you want to search just particular people, but we can see various employees here, various shifts that they've been scheduled, and it gives the hours of how they've been scheduled as well. So as I said, checking to make sure that you can see that information and people have been assigned all the shifts they need to be. With reports, you can save them, or you can take them straight out of Breathe once you've saved them, or now. Or if you decide you want to add some more filters in, just look at particular people or a particular location, particularly if the business is quite big of the clients and there's various locations, you might want to do a bit of drilling down. The other report I mentioned was the timesheets report. So if we have a look at, again, this week, generate this, here is where it will give you a list of, well, in total, how many hours people have worked, but the various hours that people have worked on their timesheets. You can use these filters here, or the customization rather, to add in the starts and the end times. So if you want to be really clear about when that was, that needs to be checked, then you can do that here. And this is what I've mentioned about taking out of Breathe, passing that on for a pay purpose. And there's the sales report. So, excuse me. Again, let's have a look at this week. I don't have too much in the way of forecasts, etc. within my demo, but there is some information here. So the forecast would be something that would be manually filled in. It shows any variance. It also shows how many hours have been forecast, as in the shifts that have been scheduled, and how many hours worked in terms of the timesheets that have been created in accordance to those. So for example, you can see that if you've got 100 hours across the whole business that have been scheduled, but actually the amount of hours that have come from people's timesheets is 140, then that would give good option to kind of have a look into that and see what's been going wrong, and do we need to employ more people? Why are these people working overtime, etc. Once you've created a report, we can schedule a report. We can see that this one is scheduled here. So how that can be done is by clicking on the 3 dots, report schedule, and you can choose the frequency of the report. So timesheets would probably be one thing that would be great to report on kind of regularly, so maybe on a monthly basis, so you don't always have to be remembering to come in and run the report for what you need. Just while I'm in these tabs at the side here, I just want to touch on the settings. So I'm not going to delve into this area kind of too much. I'm conscious of time, but the shifts is where you can kind of, this is all about customizing it for the client. So working out what the client wants to be able to do within the system, what they want their employees to be able to do or not do, and then using the check boxes to change that up and then save it. I mentioned approval processes, so if you want approvals for shift swapping, etc. The other good one to look at is the timesheet settings. So if you're happy that people can clock out and in 10 minutes before or after a shift finishes, then perhaps you change the violation parameters. So you can do that here. This is what enables you to track the location within employee dashboard and also record timesheets from clocking on in employee dashboard. And there's also mobile settings as well there. Permissions is another good one to look at. And just to mention here that with Breathe, there's obviously permissions, company admin and HR user would fall into one permission. Then there's manager, then there's employee, very much like in HR. However, there is the option to create kind of subsets of permissions. So if, for example, you've got a manager who you want to be able to view, who's working and when, but not necessarily be able to edit the rota, then that could be configured within like a subset of permissions for those particular people. Call it something specific as well. So back on the Rota screen, I want to mention events and forecasts now. I've kind of said a couple of things about it. So this has to be enabled within the settings for this box to show. So if you are looking in the client account or your demo account, you don't see it, you need to switch it on within the settings. Adding an event would be for something like a coffee morning or something like that. You can choose the dates and you can choose kind of like your budget for the particular event. I've just realized I'm just going to do it on a different day for somebody that's got a shift assigned to them. So I'm just going to add this in here, sorry. So let's go another coffee morning. You can choose a user. If there's people scheduled for shifts already, you can do that here. You can say that the event is going to cost £100. Your actual could be added in after the event has actually passed. So in terms of looking back and working out, okay, we ran that event, we had that budget, okay, that actually exceeded that budget, we need to up the budget this time, for example. There's more information you can add in, like the event address, who the person's going to be reporting to. And once you've then saved that event, whoever has then been scheduled to attend that event, it will show on their shift that they're running that coffee morning. So it means that when you're building the rota, it's quite clear to see that, okay, they're already doing something that day, so perhaps I need to add an extra person in. Forecast is a great way of setting a budget, for example. So if you know that the budget for a day is £150, for example, you can set those budgets for each day. And then when you're building your rota, if the employee has an hourly rate in HR, then that hourly rate would then filter through onto the rota. So it means that you can be kind of quite clear about how much your rota is costing. We found that that's really important for some of our partners' clients, is to make sure that there's kind of set costs for the rota and those costs are adhered to. So using the weekly summary is a great way of seeing kind of what those shifts for that particular week is totaling, and you can drill down as far as it on a daily basis as well. Okay, so I think there have been some questions kind of filtering into the Q&A box. Thank you, Adam and Hayden, for answering those. Pop any more in, but we're kind of coming towards the end, so there'll be time for some questions then hopefully too. I've gone off talking without flipping back to the presentation, sorry. So a few kind of top tips about using the module with your clients. So we think that it's kind of about knowing your audience. So I've already kind of touched on this, but if you're aware of any issues that your client might well be having to do with their rota or employee time tracking or, collation of data, etc. If you're aware of any issues that they might be having, then it might be that you think that, actually that element of Rota would be really useful to them. For example, timesheets getting lost, bits of paper going astray, that kind of real manual process, using the timesheets element of the module, even if just that alone would help to kind of be a good solution for that particular client's issues. Next kind of tip is to populate your demo account. So this isn't true just for rota time and attendance. It's true for, HR and familiarity and learn as well. The learn module that we have is great, and using your demo account to look into that is really a good idea. So like what you've seen me do a little bit, you can flip between different employee views. So for example, assigning a shift to a person in terms of RTA, and then logging in as that person, whether it's on the People Portal app or whether it's on a laptop, and then clocking on for that particular shift, seeing what view the employee has. It's really useful in helping the client to see the kind of 360 benefit of using the system. Put some emphasis back on the employees. Line managers have perhaps more of an automated way of getting information out to people. And it's also great for showing kind of key areas. So again, if your client's got a particular issue, you can hopefully solve that issue by presenting the solution to whatever that problem is. Showing a clock on, clock off example and reporting on that, as I've done, is really good example to show. And just to mention here that clients might not wish to use all of the module. The great thing about RTA is that, yes, it's designed to be used as a whole. It's capturing all of those elements that people may be struggling with. But you can use it separately. For example, you might have a client whose employees work a certain amount of hours a week. They don't have set shifts. They don't have to do it over Monday to Friday, but actually the client needs to know that they're actually working those hours, and they ideally would like to know when. So, not using the actual rota element, but allowing people to be able to clock on and clock off or manually add their own timesheets would be a great solution to that. And on the flip side as well, you might have clients who are perhaps a little bit more office based, and they don't necessarily have lots of shifts. There's kind of core office hours, but people just want to have you want to have visibility over who's in and when. So building a rota, having that printed, for example, would be a good one for that kind of situation. And I have mentioned the settings a couple of times, so they can be really configured to suit the client, whether they want to use all of it, some of it, track location or not, allow shift swapping, etc. It's really kind of up to you and the client to work out how best to kind of configure it so they can really get benefit and use out of the system. Tips and client benefits kind of merging a little bit here, but we've talked about moving away from manual processes. I've kind of mentioned that a few times, centralizing data, similar to what we aim for with HR, really, coming away from spreadsheets, paper, collating all information and having everything in one place. Reporting can be used in terms of kind of pay. Employees can access their own rota as well. So just a couple of things about that is that currently when an employee logs into their own Breathe Rota module, they only see their own shifts. That's on the app, as well as whether they log in on their dashboard. However, it's soon to change, so just bear that in mind. As far as I'm aware, the functionality is soon to be that they're able to see other shifts as well that people have, rather than having to rely on it being printed and posted on the wall of an office, for example. And the idea behind that is that if they want to offer out their shift to another person, they might want to kind of know if that's going to likely to be accepted or not, and see who else is working, etc. So that's soon to change. And the other thing which I didn't mention right back on the rota screen is that, as well as kind of creating your rota for specific people, there is also the option to add an unassigned shift as well. So let me just show you that if you don't mind now. So here, for example, we can see there's an unassigned column. When you add a shift in here, you've got the option to offer it out to everybody who fits that criteria of the role when you create that particular shift. So it means that perhaps you have some core people working certain days, but actually, you or the client, decide that actually we need some more people that day. It's likely to be busy because of X, Y, and Z. Let's add a couple of unassigned shifts and offer them out and see who wants to pick those up. People will then be notified to say there's an unassigned shift available. They can then go onto their app or their desktop and kind of accept that, put themselves forward for it. Again, it would need approving because there might well be many people that take up those extra shifts. But that sort of method might well replace a traditional, you know, line manager in a meeting saying, we need some more people for Friday, who can work? Everyone being, oh, I'll go and check. And or perhaps like a WhatsApp group, you know, everyone's in a WhatsApp group, who can work on Friday? You know, there might be lots of people saying, no, can't work, but you really want to know who can work. And actually, people are able to kind of accept that shift really easily without kind of having that communication sort of outside of the system. Again, keeping it all in one place. So unassigned shifts are really useful for that. So I'm hoping that you've kind of gathered that, you know, with lots of little time-saving elements of using the module, they really do add up, and we hope that you and your clients can see the benefit in using the module, whether it's in full or in part. And just to kind of get across that, like with HR, each client will want to, you know, use the system kind of differently, or perhaps only use kind of some of the functionality, and just it's about whatever's best for you and the client, really. I'm just going to pop back to the presentation now. A few questions that we might get asked. So the first question I'm going to answer, which isn't on here, is about Rota in your demo account. So I've mentioned about utilizing it in your demo. So as partners, you've all access to your demo account. So I'm going to tell you how you can switch Rota on. So take note of this. So we go into your demo account within your hub, log into your demo, configure, settings, modules, chargeable modules, and then you'll be presented with the module screen. Switch them all on. They're all free. It's your demo account. It does say a price, but you're not going to be charged it. Don't worry. And that's really the great way to be able to see what the additional modules are, not just Rota, and have a little bit of a play around with them as well. Once you've switched Rota on, there will be those 9 dots on the left hand side at the top where it says breathe, the logo, and then that is what we call your app switcher. That's how you then get to Rota. So a few things that have kind of cropped up. How can overtime be recorded using RTA? So at the moment, there isn't any kind of set overtime sort of process within Rota. It would be a case of the timesheet reflecting the hours worked out of the normal shift. A note could be added to the timesheet to say this is overtime. What we'd suggest is if an employee, for example, works an extra 2 hours onto their regular shift because they're covering somebody who went home sick, they clock off their regular set shift as usual and then start a new shift for the overtime. That doesn't mean to say that you have to then go onto the Rota and assign them a shift. As long as the settings are configured that they're able to clock on via their mobile or their or via a central location, then they'll be able to clock on they'll be able to clock on, and a timesheet will be created to then reflect that overtime. That might be easier to capture in terms of if there's different overtime rates, for example. So if you've got a timesheet that's kind of 2 hours, that's probably not a normal shift time. So that could be a flag to say, well, that's actually overtime. Let's just go in and check any notes that are associated to that timesheet so we can pay that person properly. Do I have to use timesheets if I'm using RTA? And can I use RTA without scheduling shifts? Hopefully I've already covered this. No, you don't have to use the time clock or the timesheets element as well. You can just use the shift building. And yes, you can use timesheets and clocking on without actually scheduling shifts. Yes, you can assign people to different locations, as can you assign them to different departments as well. That can be done by making sure that a particular role already exists within an alternative location, because the idea is that any information that's put into HR pulls through into Rota. So you're not able to say that somebody is going to be in location B if location B doesn't yet exist in HR, for example. Some of my employees don't need access to Rota. Can I remove them from the module? So the answer is no to this. It's a question I wanted to cover because it has popped up. Some people have certain departments that would benefit from using the Rota. For example, the factory that's shift work, but perhaps the same client has an office for that particular business who wouldn't necessarily benefit from using the module, but they will still appear there. But it's just about making sure that obviously the users that will be using it have access to it, and the ones that won't be using it can still access it, but they just wouldn't be benefiting in that way. Can the module link to payroll software? I've mentioned we don't have a current integration, but I've also mentioned that we have our own payroll module coming soon, so there will be an integration that way. So I'm aware that we've kind of come full up to time, so thank you all for bearing with me. As I mentioned, Hayden and Adam have been really busily answering questions, so thank you so much. It looks like there's one outstanding question. Can I enable the RTA module from only the admin account or through the HR demo account? Can I enable the RTA? Okay, so you probably need to access your demo account through the Partner Hub. So logging in as an admin through the Partner Hub will then give you that option to see chargeable modules. I hope that makes sense. So I'm just going to hold on a moment in case there's anybody who's got any questions before we finish up. I hope it's been a useful session. There might well be some of you who haven't yet taken a look at the module. Hopefully it's given a bit of an overview of what it could do and how it could help your clients and add value to the way that you're working with them as well. And as I said, there might be people who have already had a look, and hopefully it's a good recap, and perhaps you've been able to learn a few things that weren't there before. We have found that since we launched the module, there's kind of constant little developments with it, which we hope are really useful. And we hope to be able to be more proactive at informing you of those things in the future. Definitely our roadmap webinar is one to look out for to do things like that. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions coming through. Thank you to those of you who have asked, and again to Adam and Hayden for answering. The last thing to mention is that you all have an account manager, so please do get in touch with your account manager should you have any further questions, or if you'd like to have a further look into the module, particularly if you've got clients who you think could benefit but aren't quite sure if how they work could be reflected within the module, then do get in touch with your account manager and they can certainly give you some guidance on that. And the last thing to mention is that we have our Breathe event tomorrow. So it's the People First and Partner Summit event in London. So hope to see lots of you there. And those who aren't, then we'll be able to hopefully share some insights after as to how the event's gone. And thank you all very much for your time in joining. Thanks very much. Have a good day. Bye.